Hello everyone, today we're gonna take a look at PlayStation Move Heroes, the latest Sony published game developed exclusively for the PlayStation Move, in this case by Nihilistic Software. This is some sort of crossover game featuring characters from the Ratchet and Clank, the Jak and Daxter and the Sly Cooper series, all facing a common threat.
The most amazing heroes anywhere! Without you, your world would have been taken over by the worst elements long ago.
But this is not an action-adventure game, it's actually a collection of challenges you have to complete using different weapons. More specifically, there are 5 types of challenges and as many kinds of weapons, which are then combined and permutated to create dozens of actual game levels. The challenge types are Survival, Rescue, Jailbreak, Guardian and Countdown. Let's see them briefly. In Survival you need to destroy waves of enemies. In Rescue you need to find and return creatures to their mommy. In Jailbreak you need to free creatures from cages. In Guardian you have to protect 3 pods from enemies. And in Countdown you need to power up rockets by collecting crystals. As for the weapons, we've got melee ones, a whip, a gun, a flying disc, and some sort of a bowling ball. I'll talk about these in more detail shortly, but for the time being it's worth saying that you can't freely choose which weapon to use, but rather select the challenge weapon combination from a predefined collection. Once all the challenges are completed, you move to another selection of predefined combinations. In this area, for example, we have got a Guardian challenge with a whip, a Jailbreak challenge with the disc, and another Jailbreak challenge with the bowling ball. In this other one here we have got a Rescue challenge with a gun, a Countdown challenge with a bowling ball, and a Jailbreak challenge with a whip. Depending on the weapon associated with a given challenge, you can pick up your character from a selection of 3, be them the main ones Sly, Ratchet and Jak, or their sidekicks Bentley, Clank and Daxter. Each character has its own ultimate ability, which can be used with L1 once enough crystals are collected. For example, Ratchet can toss its Groovytron ball. Sly can slow down time. Jak can perform an area attack. Or Clank can call zone support.
Wow!
Besides these abilities, all characters behave the very same and are controlled with the analog stick, with L2 acting as both a lock-on button or a camera recentering one during third person on foot action. Okay, now let's see how the motion controls were implemented in the game. As I said, there are 5 different weapons you will get to use, and each one has its own motion control method. Let's begin this analysis with the most interesting one as far as move implementation as a shooting device goes. Instead of the bounding box based system we have seen in other move compatible shooters, the shooting section in PlayStation Move Heroes adopts a fixed crosshair solution. What this means is that by tilting the controller you orientate both the camera and the cursor simultaneously, just like you do with a traditional controller or mouse. This sort of a one-to-one implementation hasn't been done before with the Move for reasons that are easy to understand once you have considered the consequences. Take a look at this simulation. This is how looking around in a first-person game would work like if we had the Move directly controlling the camera. Now, while this looks awesome in theory, in practice it brings up a couple of issues. For example, let's pretend to turn by 90 degrees here and then move straight ahead. As you can see, when you turn around you end up pointing the Move to the sides, while it's still aiming ahead on the screen. It sure must not feel that great to move ahead holding the controller like that. Of course I'm exaggerating the motion here to better explain what I'm talking about. You can obviously have this system tweaked so that minimal motions yield bigger on-screen results. Anyway, The bigger issue with the one-to-one camera control relates to the turning. You simply can't do that indefinitely like you could with a traditional controller unless you spin the move like this. Not really practical. A solution to this turning problem would be to implement a mouse-like lift surrogate. You could have it so that the camera is controlled only while holding down a button, such as the main move one. Releasing that button would be akin to lifting a mouse, allowing you to recenter the controller without affecting the camera orientation. This is a system that could actually work, but would you sacrifice a button just for that? So now that you know the main issues to be considered when implementing this sort of one-to-one camera control, let's get back to PlayStation Move Heroes to see how the developers have tried to solve them. What they basically did was merging the one-to-one camera control with the more common bounding box solution, with interesting results, as you can see. Let's see how it works in more detail. While you always have direct control over vertical camera angle since there is no turning involved, for horizontal camera angle, direct control applies only within a small arc. We will call this the one-to-one arc. When pointing away from the one-to-one arc, the camera behaves as you move an imaginary on-screen cursor away from an imaginary bounding box. It begins rotating, but the reticle stays fixed in the middle of the screen. The farther you angle the move away from the one-to-one arc, the faster the camera rotates. And when you want to halt rotation, you simply angle the move back within the one-to-one arc. With this system, the developers managed to kill two birds with one stone. On one hand, you get to spin around without having to use any lift button. On the other hand, the disconnection between move angle and on-screen reticle is mitigated by the need to recenter the move to halt rotation, as well as by the relatively small size of the one-to-one arc. Now you might be wondering why other developers haven't adopted this method yet. Well, if you ask them, they would claim that the one-to-one camera controls feels disorientating, and yet it seems to be working fine here. So what's the deal? Well, first of all, it has to be said that the implementation here in PlayStation Move Heroes, while effective in the slow-paced, casual context of the game, wouldn't work as well in a more challenging situation. As it is, the tilting sensitivity within the one-to-one arc is set quite low, and the maximum turning speed is hardly optimal. Increasing the sensitivity and the turn speed would theoretically allow for this implementation to work great in a more hardcore first or third-person shooter, but in practice the quicker camera rotation might actually turn out to be disorientating, as some developers say. It's hard to tell without fiddling with those sensitivity values, and sadly PlayStation Move Heroes doesn't offer any option to do so. Therefore, for the time being, I call this a solution worth further investigation, rather than one any move shooter needs to adopt. What I can say with confidence though is that it certainly is much more intuitive than your average bounding box solution. It feels second nature right away, albeit somewhat sluggish due to the casual-friendly low sensitivity. Anyway, moving on, one last thing to mention about the shooting challenges in Heroes is that there are three types of guns you will get to use throughout the game. Besides the rifle-like gun you're seeing here, there is also a shotgun and a grenade launcher. You can't switch between them freely, mind you, and they all behave the same console-wise. The shooting mechanics per se are also pretty basic. There is no aim down the sights, for example. Another interesting application of motion controls comes with the whip. Unlike sports champions, the degree of one-to-one tracking is limited to some minor animation, as you can see here. But that's hardly an issue when you still get the feeling of actually striking a whip, which is the case here. Despite being totally gesture-based, the system reads enough variety of gestures to create an illusion of direct control. As you can see, the whip reacts consistently to the direction of my flicks.
Let's go.
Moreover, if you put the move back at the right time, a small blast occurs when the whip cracks. You can also charge a power attack by holding the move over your shoulder and then execute it in different ways. Finally, holding down the trigger allows to grab enemies or objects and toss them in different directions. There is a lot of assist going on, so you always end up hitting your intended target. This applies to the basic whip attacks as well, with mixed results, sometimes interfering with your real intentions. As far as consistency goes, most of the time the whip reacts correctly to your gestures, but in rare occasions it doesn't react at all, or it does when it shouldn't. Nothing really game-breaking though. Similarly to the whip, melee weapons react to gestures rather than one-to-one tracking, allowing for horizontal, vertical and even diagonal attacks consistent with the direction of your motions. Almost too consistent actually, as attacks are triggered as soon as you move the controller, meaning a slash in a given direction is often preceded by one in the opposite direction. This is not a problem though, as the direction of your attacks doesn't matter as much as the orientation, and that's something that the system tracks perfectly. Melee attacks also allowed for a more powerful variance by holding down the trigger while executing the motion. Whenever you are using the whip or the melee weapon, holding down the main move button allows to block, and similarly to the PSP version of God of War, you can evade attacks while parrying by flicking the controller in the direction you want to dodge.
Oh, this is gonna chill me right off.
Recalculating attack.
Less interesting but still well executed are the disc controls. Pretty simply, to throw the disc you hold down the trigger, execute the throwing motion and release the trigger. Then to actually control the disc you tilt the controller around as it was the disc itself. You can tilt it any way you like, even upside down, without losing control, but you have to pay attention to its speed, since it behaves like an hand glider and therefore can stall.
Yay!
As I said, it's a pretty simple implementation, not unlike what we have already seen in games like Flower, albeit it has to be said that the one hand and the nature of the controls, as well as the superior responsiveness of the move sensors, add an extra sense of freedom and agility to the experience. It would be nice to play Flower like this actually. Anyway, unlike other weapons, the disc is available only in the jailbreak challenges. Similar to the disc, the bowling ball is thrown via a swinging gesture, a vertical one rather than an horizontal one, and you don't have to be standing to do it properly. The ball can be steered by tilting the controller, a quick flick upwards makes it jump, and pressing the move button detonates it. Finally, PlayStation Move heroes can be enjoyed by two people simultaneously via the so-called team play co-op mode. One player maneuvers the main character just like in the single player mode, while the other one offers support via an on-screen pointer. The supporting player basically takes the role of the main character partner and has access to 4 items, which can be used as long as enough crystals are collected. 2 of them are crystal shots and grenades. While the other 2 change depending on either the character being used or the challenge at hand. In the first case you are given a character-specific special attack, like the enemy freezing temporal lock for Bentley,
Temporal lock!
Impressive!
or the enemy sucking time bomb for Clank.
Ow.
If you are playing a time-based challenge, the supporting player can spend crystals to extend the time limit.
Time extending.
If the challenge involves fighting, extra health can be given instead. Finally, a powerful team strike attack can be triggered by having the move spheres touching each other.
Calculating risk to reward ratios. Take that!
A pretty cool action, but sadly it can only be done once per challenge. Now, despite all the cool things PlayStation Move Heroes does in terms of motion controls, its core design is quite lacking in terms of depth, and the overall difficulty is so low you will get awarded golds at your first attempts in most of its challenges.
Why aren't they dead yet?
Because your stupid challenges aren't hard enough!
It feels like playing through a series of control interfaces proof of concept, showing what you could do with the move without ever building on that potential, resulting in a fairly simple and repetitive experience.
Yes, anything is better than those horrible challenges.
If you have already played the demo available on the PlayStation Store, you already know what to expect, since the full game has you doing the very same stuff over and over again. And this is it. Thanks for watching, ciao!
10,